The morning sun cast strange purple light through the crystal windows of the Galactic Academy. Marcus Chen walked down the long hallway, his footsteps echoing against the smooth walls. Other students moved away from him as he passed. Not obviously, but enough that he noticed. They always did this. Marcus had been at the academy for 6 months now. 6 months of trying to fit in with beings from dozens of different worlds. 6 months of careful smiles and quiet voices. 6 months of pretending he didn't notice the way conversations stopped when he entered a room. He was the only human at the academy. The first human to ever attend, actually. It was supposed to be a great honor, a sign that humanity was ready to join the bigger galactic community. But Marcus often wondered if it was more like being a zoo animal on display. The other students weren't mean to him. They were polite. Very polite. Too polite. The kind of politeness people used when they were afraid but trying to hide it. Marcus understood why. Earth had a reputation out here among the stars. Humans came from what the galaxy called a death world, a planet so dangerous that just living there had turned its inhabitants into something that scared most other species. Marcus had read the reports. The galactic database described humans as apex predators with unusual problem-solving abilities and potentially hazardous if threatened. Marcus thought that was funny. He had never felt particularly dangerous. Sure, he could run for hours without getting tired. Yes, he could lift heavy things that other students struggled with. And okay, he did have reflexes that seemed fast compared to most of his classmates. But dangerous? He was studying to be a diplomat, for crying out loud. The classroom for advanced interspecies relations was on the 3rd floor. Marcus climbed the stairs 2 at a time, something that had caused a stir on his first day. Apparently, most species found stairs challenging. Who knew? When he entered the classroom, the usual thing happened. Conversations paused. Eyes looked his way, then quickly looked away. Marcus took his seat in the back corner. It wasn't assigned seating, but somehow he always ended up in the back corner, away from everyone else. His desk partner was Ziri, a small blue creature from the Centauri system. Ziri was probably the closest thing Marcus had to a friend at the academy. She was one of the few students who would actually talk to him like he was normal. "Good morning, Marcus," Ziri said in her musical voice. Her people communicated partly through sound and partly through color changes in their skin. Right now, her blue was mixed with nervous yellow. "Morning, Ziri. You okay? You seem a bit worried about something." Ziri's skin flickered to a deeper yellow. "Professor Veltar sent a message last night. We're having a special guest lecturer today. Someone important?" Marcus nodded. Guest lecturers were common at the academy. Usually they were boring officials from various planetary governments or retired diplomats with stories about trade negotiations. "Anyone interesting?" "That's just it," Ziri whispered. The professor wouldn't say who it was, just that we should prepare ourselves for a unique learning experience. The classroom filled up over the next few minutes. There were about 30 students in the class. Etherians with their tall, thin bodies and translucent skin, Krillians with their hard shells and multiple arms, small, furry Valdris who looked like someone had mixed a cat with a teddy bear, even a couple of Gornathi, the rock-like beings who spoke very slowly and thought even slower. Everyone was talking about the mystery guest. Marcus caught bits of conversation in various languages. Some students seemed excited. Others seemed nervous. No one seemed to know what to expect. Professor Veltar entered the room right on time. She was Etherian. About 7 feet tall with skin so clear Marcus could see the purple liquid that served as her blood moving through visible veins. She had been teaching for over 300 years, which was middle-aged for her species. "Good morning, class," Professor Veltar said. Her voice had a quality that made everyone immediately quiet and pay attention. "Today we have a very special visitor, someone who will share insights about an aspect of galactic relations that we rarely discuss in academic settings." She paused, looking around the room. Her large silver eyes lingered on Marcus for a moment longer than the others. "Our guest today has ended 3 interstellar wars, not through diplomacy or negotiation, but through more direct methods. Please welcome Kethvar the Render." The classroom door opened and Marcus felt his grin start before he could stop it. The being that entered was magnificent, 8 feet tall, covered in natural armor that looked like black metal. 4 arms, each ending in hands that had razor-sharp claws instead of fingers. Its head was elongated with mandibles that clicked as it moved. This was a Krillian, but not just any Krillian. This was a Render. Marcus had read about them in his military history classes back on Earth. They were living weapons bred and trained from birth to be perfect killers. The galaxy's most feared assassins. This particular one was famous. Kethvar the Render had single-handedly ended the Vegan War by eliminating key leaders on both sides. The Proxima conflict had stopped when Kethvar made it clear that continued fighting would result in more targeted deaths. And Marcus was grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. The grin felt natural on his face, but he could see the effect it had on his classmates. Ziri had gone completely yellow, the color of pure fear among her people. Other students were actually moving their chairs away from him. Someone in the front row made a small whimpering sound. Kethvar noticed too. The assassin's head turned toward Marcus, and for a moment, those black eyes studied the human with what looked like interest. "Thank you, Professor Veltar," Kethvar said. Its voice was like rocks grinding together. "I am honored to address your students today." The Render moved to the front of the classroom with fluid grace despite its size. Each step was perfectly placed, making no unnecessary sound. Marcus found himself analyzing the movement, noting how efficiently the creature conserved energy while maintaining perfect balance. It was beautiful in its way. "I am here," Kethvar continued, "to discuss the reality of conflict resolution through elimination. In your diplomatic studies, you learn about negotiation, compromise, and peaceful solutions. These are admirable goals. But sometimes peace can only be achieved by removing those who refuse to allow it." Professor Veltar had taken a seat at the side of the room. She looked uncomfortable, but this had clearly been planned. Marcus wondered why they thought a class of future diplomats needed to hear from a professional killer. Then he noticed that several of his classmates kept looking at him. Not just quick glances, but actual staring. And their expressions weren't just fearful anymore. They looked worried, suspicious, like they were seeing him in a new light. Oh, Marcus's grin faded as understanding hit him. This wasn't really about teaching diplomacy at all. This was about him, about showing the other students what humans really were, what they were capable of. The Academy had brought in a legendary killer, probably the most dangerous being most of these students would ever see. And Marcus had smiled when he saw it. As Kethvar began its lecture about the necessity of violence in certain situations, Marcus realized that his reaction had confirmed every fear his classmates had about humans. To them, his smile meant he recognized a kindred spirit, a fellow predator. Marcus settled back in his chair, still watching the Render with interest. He couldn't help it. This was fascinating, but now he was also curious about what would happen next. And despite everything, he was still smiling, just a little bit. Kethvar moved to the center of the classroom and activated the holographic display system. The lights dimmed slightly as three-dimensional images appeared in the air above the device. The first image showed a basic humanoid figure, translucent and rotating slowly. "Elimination is an art," the Render began, its voice carrying easily through the room. "It requires understanding of biology, psychology, and opportunity. Each species presents unique challenges and opportunities." Marcus watched as his classmates took out their note-taking devices. Most looked uncomfortable, but they were still paying attention. This was, after all, part of their education. Understanding all aspects of galactic relations, even the darker ones. The holographic figure changed, showing different alien anatomies. First an Etherian, then a Krillian, then others Marcus recognized from around campus. "The Etherian cardiovascular system," Kethvar said, pointing with one clawed hand, "is centralized but visible. A single precise strike here," the image zoomed in on the torso, "will cause immediate system failure. However, their reflexes are excellent, making approach difficult." Several Etherian students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Professor Veltar's translucent skin had taken on a slightly darker shade. Marcus raised his hand. Kethvar paused, those black eyes focusing on him. "Yes?" "What about species with redundant systems?" Marcus asked. His voice was casual, conversational, like he was asking about homework. "I mean, some beings have multiple hearts or distributed circulatory systems, right? How would you adapt your technique for those?" The classroom went very quiet. Marcus could feel everyone staring at him, but he kept his attention on Kethvar. This was genuinely interesting. The Render tilted its head slightly. "An astute question." "Yes. Species like the Valdris have dual cardiovascular systems. In such cases, simultaneous strikes would be necessary, or targeting their central nervous system instead. Right. But what about something like a Gornathi? Marcus continued. They don't really have a nervous system like most species. More of a distributed mineral consciousness, isn't it? Would you go for structural damage to their core matrix, or try to disrupt their electromagnetic field somehow? Marcus heard someone behind him make a choking sound. He glanced back to see one of the Valdris students staring at him with wide, terrified eyes. The small, furry being was actually trembling. When Marcus looked back at Kethvar, he was surprised to see what might have been approval in those dark eyes. Impressive knowledge of comparative biology, the render said. Yes, the Gornathi require a different approach entirely. Their consciousness is distributed through crystalline structures. Disruption of key resonance frequencies can cause temporary shutdown, but permanent elimination requires molecular-level intervention. Like sonics? Marcus asked. Or would you need something more direct, like introducing destabilizing elements into their mineral structure? Both methods have been tested, Kethvar replied, though I find the sonic approach more elegant. Less messy. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Makes sense. Plus, you could probably use natural acoustics to amplify the effect. Cave systems, architectural features, that sort of thing. Professor Veltar cleared her throat loudly. Perhaps we could move on to the theoretical applications of this knowledge in diplomatic situations. But Kethvar seemed genuinely engaged now. The human raises valid points about environmental adaptation. Tell me, student, what would you suggest for aquatic operations? Well, that depends, Marcus said, leaning forward with interest. Are we talking about amphibious species who can survive on land or fully aquatic beings? Because if it's fully aquatic, you'd need to consider water pressure, limited mobility for non-aquatic operatives, and probably different tools entirely. Traditional blade weapons would be inefficient underwater due to resistance. Continue, Kethvar said. I'd probably go with something like modified spearfishing equipment, pneumatic maybe for close range. Or if you could get close enough, just basic diving techniques. Most land-based species don't realize how easy it is to drown someone underwater. Just need to control their breathing apparatus or block their gills. The silence in the classroom was complete now. Marcus could almost feel the fear radiating from his classmates. Even Professor Veltar looked pale, which was saying something for an Etherian. You speak as if you have experience with these methods, Kethvar observed. Marcus laughed. Not really. I just grew up near the ocean. You learn things about water, safety, you know? Plus, I used to go spearfishing with my dad. Same principles, just different targets. Spearfishing, Kethvar repeated. Yeah, it's pretty common on Earth. You dive down, usually holding your breath, and hunt fish with a spear gun. Good for food, good for sport. My personal best was a 40-pound tuna at about 60 feet down. Took me 3 tries to get close enough for a clean shot. Marcus looked around the classroom and noticed that everyone was staring at him with expressions of pure horror. Even Ziri, his closest friend, had turned completely yellow and was pressed, back in her chair as if trying to get as far away from him as possible. What? Marcus asked. It's just fishing. You hunt underwater, said one of the Krillian students in a strangled voice. For sport. Well, yeah, also for dinner. Fresh fish is really good if you prepare it right. Marcus turned back to Kethvar. Speaking of preparation, what's your take on environmental toxins? I mean, if you needed to eliminate someone but make it look natural? Kethvar's mandibles clicked in what Marcus was starting to recognize as interest. Elaborate. Like, every planet has naturally occurring toxic substances, right? Plants, animals, minerals, whatever. If you knew the local ecosystem well enough, you could probably find something that would do the job, but just look like an accident. Bad mushrooms, venomous bite, stuff like that. You have studied toxicology? Kethvar asked. Not formally, but I did a lot of camping and hiking back home. You learn to identify dangerous plants and animals pretty quick. Plus, my mom made me take a wilderness first aid course. Amazing how many common things can kill you if you're not careful. Marcus pulled out his tablet and started flipping through some photos. Look, this is from a camping trip last year. See this little red berry? Looks harmless, right? But just 5 or 6 of these will cause complete organ failure in most humanoids. And this mushroom here? Tastes great, but if you don't prepare it exactly right, it's deadly. Oh, and this is a pretty flower we found by the lake. Beautiful color. The pollen causes respiratory paralysis. He showed the images to Kethvar, who leaned in to examine them closely. Fascinating, the render said. Your world has an abundance of natural toxins. Oh yeah, Earth's trying to kill you pretty much constantly. But that's what makes it fun, you know? You learn to pay attention. Always be aware of your environment, what you're eating, what's around you. It's like a game. Marcus looked up to find 30 pairs of eyes staring at him in absolute terror. Professor Veltar looked like she was about to faint, which Marcus hadn't known was possible for Etherians. What's wrong? Marcus asked. Did I say something weird? Nobody answered. The classroom was so quiet that Marcus could hear the ventilation system humming. Kethvar's mandibles clicked again. This time Marcus was pretty sure it was laughter. Tell me, human, the render said. What other games did you play on your world? Marcus thought about Kethvar's question, while his classmates continued to stare at him like he had grown extra arms. What games? He tried to think of how to explain normal childhood activities to beings who apparently found spearfishing terrifying. Well, there was orienteering, Marcus said. That's where you get dropped in the middle of nowhere with just a compass and a map, and you have to find your way back to base camp. Usually at night in bad weather. It's great fun. He noticed several students exchange horrified looks. Professor Veltar had actually pulled out her communication device and seemed to be typing something urgent. We also played Capture the Flag in the woods behind our school. You had to sneak through enemy territory, avoid detection, steal their flag, and make it back without getting caught. The teachers would set up obstacles and traps to make it more challenging. Traps? Asked one of the Valdris students in a tiny voice. Sure. Pitfalls, tripwires, that sort of thing. Nothing dangerous, just stuff that would slow you down or make noise to alert the other team. Though Jimmy Peterson did fall into that creek that one time. Marcus chuckled at the memory. Poor kid was soaking wet and covered in mud. We had to carry him back to the nurse's office. Kethvar leaned forward. These were children's games? Oh yeah, we started playing stuff like that when we were maybe 8 or 9 years old. Great way to learn teamwork, problem-solving, basic survival skills. Plus, it kept us busy and out of trouble. Marcus pulled up more photos on his tablet. Here's me and my friends at summer camp when I was 12. See, we're building shelter out of branches and leaves. Had to sleep in it for 3 nights. No tents, no sleeping bags, just what we could make from what we found in the forest. The image showed a younger Marcus grinning beside a rough lean-to made from branches, leaves, and what looked like mud. He was dirty, his clothes were torn, and he looked absolutely delighted. This was considered fun? Professor Veltar asked weakly. The best. We had competitions to see who could build the most weatherproof shelter, who could start a fire fastest, who could identify the most edible plants. I won the fire-starting contest 3 years running. Could get a good flame going in under 30 seconds even in the rain. Marcus swiped to another photo. This is from Scout Camp. We did a 2-week wilderness survival course. No supplies except what we could carry in a single backpack. Had to find or make everything else we needed. Food, water purification, tools, everything. The photo showed a group of teenagers around Marcus's age, all looking thin but proud, displaying various improvised tools and weapons. Marcus was holding what looked like a spear with a sharpened stone tip. You made weapons, Kethvar observed. Sure, need them for hunting and protection. Can't exactly chase down a deer with your bare hands. Well, I mean, you could, but it would take forever and you'd probably get kicked in the head. Marcus laughed. Much easier to make a proper spear or set up some snares. He showed another image. See these? Rabbit snares, made from wire and set along game trails. You study the animal tracks, figure out their patterns, then place your traps where they're most likely to pass. We caught enough rabbits to feed the whole group for a week. You hunted animals for food, one of the Etherian students said in a horrified whisper. Marcus looked genuinely confused. Well, yeah. What did you think we ate? We weren't going to starve. Plus, fresh rabbit is delicious if you prepare it right. My grandpa taught me how to skin and clean them properly. Waste nothing, you know? He swiped to more photos. Here's me cleaning fish we caught in the river. And this one shows how to identify which mushrooms are safe to eat. Oh, and this is a medicinal plant that helps with infections. Tastes terrible, but it works great if you don't have proper antibiotics. Marcus looked up from his tablet to find the entire classroom staring at him in complete silence. Even Kethvar had stopped clicking its mandibles. "Are you guys okay?" Marcus asked. "You all look a little freaked out." Professor Veltar's voice was barely above a whisper. "Marcus, how old were you when you learned these skills?" "Different ages for different things. Basic fire starting and shelter building, maybe 7 or 8. Hunting and trapping, around 10. Advanced tracking and survival stuff, probably 12 or 13. Most human kids learn this stuff pretty early. It's just basic safety knowledge." "Safety knowledge," Professor Veltar repeated faintly. "Sure, Earth's dangerous. You need to know how to take care of yourself. Wild animals, poisonous plants, severe weather, natural disasters. Plus you never know when you might get lost or stranded somewhere. Better to be prepared." Marcus looked around the room again. His classmates seemed to be having trouble breathing. Several were clutching their desks like they might fall over. "Look, I don't understand why everyone's so upset," Marcus said. "This is all normal stuff. Every human child learns this. It's not like we're trying to be scary or anything. We just want to survive." "Survive," Keithavar said thoughtfully. "Tell me, human, what did you do for recreation that didn't involve what you call survival skills?" Marcus brightened. "Oh, lots of things. Sports mostly. I played rugby for 6 years. That's a great game. 2 teams. You try to get the ball to the other end of the field and the other team tries to stop you. Full contact, no protective gear except a mouth guard." "Full contact," Kethvar repeated. "Yeah, tackling, grabbing, pushing. Really gets the blood flowing. I broke my nose twice and dislocated my shoulder once, but it was worth it. Great team-building exercise. Plus it keeps you in shape." Marcus pulled up a video on his tablet. "Here's the championship game from my senior year. See, that's me with the ball about to get tackled by 3 guys. Got steamrolled pretty good, but I managed to pass it off to my teammate before they took me down." The video showed Marcus running at full speed toward several larger opponents who hit him simultaneously. In what looked like a devastating collision, Marcus disappeared under a pile of bodies while the crowd cheered. "You did this voluntarily," Professor Veltar said. "Loved every minute of it. Though I also enjoyed wrestling. That's more one-on-one. You try to pin your opponent or make them submit. Great workout. Plus it teaches you how to read body language and leverage physics to your advantage." Marcus showed another video of himself grappling with another student on a mat, both of them straining and sweating as they tried to gain advantage over the other. "We also did martial arts. I got pretty good at jiu-jitsu. That's where you learn to use an opponent's strength against them. Really useful for dealing with larger attackers. Plus it's good exercise and builds confidence." "Attackers," one of the Krillian students managed to say. "Well, you never know. Better to have the skills and not need them than need them and not have them, right?" Marcus shrugged. "My parents insisted I learn some kind of self-defense. Earth can be a rough place sometimes." He looked around the classroom again. Everyone looked like they were about to be sick. "Seriously, what's wrong with you guys? These are just normal activities. Fun stuff. Character building." Marcus paused. "Wait, what do kids on your worlds do for fun?" The question seemed to break something in the room. Several students actually whimpered. Professor Veltar was typing frantically on her communicator, probably calling for help. Only Kethvar seemed calm. The render was watching Marcus with what might have been fascination. "Human," Kethvar said slowly, "I believe your classmates are beginning to understand what your species truly is." Marcus looked around at the terrified faces and felt a sinking sensation in his stomach. "Oh," he said quietly, "oh no. You guys think I'm some kind of monster, don't you?" The uncomfortable silence stretched for several long moments. Marcus looked from face to face, seeing fear in every expression. Even Ziri, his closest friend, had moved her chair as far away from him as possible. Kethvar finally broke the silence. "Human," the render said, standing up from its position near the holographic display. "Your knowledge is impressive, but knowledge and application are different things." Professor Veltar looked up from her frantic typing. "Mr. Kethvar, I don't think this is appropriate. I propose a practical exercise," Kethvar continued, ignoring the professor. "A test of theoretical knowledge against real application." Marcus felt his heart rate pick up. Not from fear, but from interest. "What kind of test?" "A hunt," Kethvar said simply. "Me hunting you?" The Academy's maintenance tunnels provide an excellent controlled environment. Multiple levels, various obstacles, limited but adequate space. The classroom erupted in panicked voices. Students were talking over each other in multiple languages. but Marcus caught enough to understand they thought this was insane. Professor Veltar was actually standing now, her translucent skin flushed dark with agitation. "Absolutely not," she said firmly. "I will not allow—" "It would be educational," Kethvar said. "For everyone. The other students can observe through the security monitoring system. A chance to see theory put into practice." Marcus considered this. A legendary assassin wanted to hunt him through underground tunnels. It was either the most dangerous thing anyone had ever suggested, or the most exciting opportunity he'd had since arriving at the academy. "Would there be rules?" Marcus asked. Every head in the room turned to stare at him. Several students made choking sounds. "You're actually considering this?" Siri whispered. "Simple rules," Kethavar said, its mandibles clicking with what Marcus now recognized as amusement. "Non-lethal engagement only. The hunt ends when I tag you with a practice blade or you successfully evade me for 1 standard hour." "What do I get if I win?" Marcus asked. "You won't," Kethavar said confidently. "But if you somehow manage to evade me for the full hour, I will answer any questions you have about my techniques." Marcus grinned. He couldn't help it. This was the most interesting thing that had happened to him in months. "Deal." Professor Veltar looked like she might actually faint. "Marcus, you can't be serious. This creature is a professional killer." "It'll be fine," Marcus said, already thinking through possibilities. "I've played way rougher games than this. Remember, I've been doing this kind of stuff since I was a kid." 20 minutes later, Marcus found himself in the academy's lower levels, standing at the entrance to the maintenance tunnel system. The tunnels were used by automated systems to move supplies and perform repairs throughout the massive academy complex. They stretched for miles in all directions with multiple levels and connecting passages. Marcus had visited them once before, out of curiosity. The academy's AI had given him a brief tour when he'd asked about the facility's infrastructure. Now he was grateful for that casual exploration. He looked around, taking note of his environment. The main tunnel was about 8 feet high and 6 feet wide, with smaller branching passages every 50 feet or so. Emergency lighting provided minimal illumination. The air was cool and moved with a slight breeze from the ventilation system. Through his earpiece, he could hear commentary from the classroom above. Professor Veltar was explaining the tunnel layout to the other students, who were watching through security cameras. Their voices sounded worried, excited, and terrified all at the same time. "The human has 5 minutes to prepare," Kethvar's voice came through the speakers. "Then I enter the tunnels." Marcus used the time wisely. He pulled off his academy jacket and shoes, leaving them in a pile by the entrance. Better to move quietly in just his basic clothes. Then he jogged down the main tunnel, checking the branching passages and getting a feel for the layout. The academy's maintenance bots were still running their normal routines. Small wheeled units moving supplies and performing repairs. Marcus watched one pass by, noting its size and speed. Useful information. He found a ventilation grate and tested it. Loose. Good to know. There was also a heating conduit that ran along the ceiling, warm to the touch. And the lighting system seemed to be motion activated in many sections, which meant movement would be visible to anyone watching. "Time," Kethvar announced. Marcus settled into a comfortable crouch in a side passage about 200 feet from the entrance. He controlled his breathing and listened. The tunnel system carried sound well, so he should be able to hear Kethvar moving long before the render could locate him. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. Then Marcus heard it, the soft click of claws on metal flooring. Kethvar had entered the tunnels and was moving with surprising stealth for something so large. Marcus waited until the sounds passed his hiding spot, then began moving in the opposite direction. He stayed low and kept to the walls where the shadows were deepest. The render was probably using its superior senses to track him, so staying ahead of those senses was key. Through his earpiece, he could hear his classmates providing commentary. "The human is moving through Section C4, someone reported. Kethvar is in Section B2, approximately 300 meters away." Marcus smiled. Having spotters was actually helpful. He changed direction, heading toward an area he remembered from his earlier exploration. "Wait," came Ziri's voice. "What is he doing?" Marcus had reached one of the maintenance bot charging stations. 3 units were currently docked and inactive. He quickly examined their simple control systems, found what he was looking for, and made some adjustments. "He's tampering with Academy property," Professor Veltar said disapprovingly. He's setting up early warning systems, came another voice. Marcus was surprised to recognize it as belonging to one of the Krillian students. If someone approaches the charging station, those bots will activate and move. He'll hear them. Marcus nodded approvingly. At least someone understood basic tactics. He continued through the tunnels, setting up similar early warning systems at key points. A loose ventilation grate here, a motion sensor there, a carefully balanced piece of debris that would fall if disturbed. Kethvar is moving faster now, Ziri reported. He's found the human's jacket and shoes, Tracir. Heard this through his earpiece just as one of his, improvised alarms triggered. A maintenance bot suddenly, whirring to life about 100 meters behind him. The render was closing in. Time to get creative. Marcus found a heating conduit junction and quickly climbed up into the space above the main tunnel. The area was cramped and hot, but it provided access to the Academy's environmental systems. He followed the conduit for about 50 meters, then dropped back down in a completely different section. Where did he go? Someone asked over the comm. The cameras lost him. Thermal camouflage, Marcus heard Kethvar say, its voice now coming through the general speakers. Clever. He's using the heating system to mask his body heat signature. Another alarm triggered, this time from a different direction. Marcus had rigged several false trails using the maintenance bots. By reprogramming them to move in specific patterns, he could create the impression of movement in areas where he wasn't actually present. The human is in 3 places at once, Professor Veltar said, confusion clear in her voice. No, Kethvar replied. He's making me think he's in 3 places at once. Also clever, Marcus was actually having fun now. This was like the most elaborate game of hide-and-seek he'd ever played. He moved through the tunnels with growing confidence, staying ahead of his pursuer while gradually learning the render's patterns. Kethvar was fast and strong, but it was also predictable. It moved like a hunter from a world where prey either ran in straight lines or tried to fight directly. It wasn't used to quarry that turned the environment itself into a weapon. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a water bottle and a sandwich he'd grabbed from the cafeteria that morning. Lunchtime. What is he doing now? Someone asked through the comm. Marcus settled into a comfortable spot in a maintenance alcove and unwrapped his sandwich. Through the earpiece, he could hear Kethvar moving around in the tunnels nearby, following false trails and getting increasingly frustrated. 20 minutes left in the hour. Marcus took another bite of his sandwich and waited for the next phase of the game to begin. Marcus finished his sandwich and checked the time. 15 minutes left. Through his earpiece, he could hear increasing frustration in the voices of those watching from above. Kethvar had been chasing false trails and improvised distractions for the past half hour while Marcus moved freely through sections of the tunnel, system that the render hadn't even found yet. How is this possible? Professor Veltar was asking. Kethvar is a legendary hunter. The human is just a student. The human is playing by different rules, came the reply from one of the observers. Marcus was pleased to hear it was the same Krillian student who had understood his bot manipulation earlier. He's not trying to hide from a hunter. He's turned the tunnels into his territory, that was exactly right. Marcus wasn't thinking of this as being hunted at all. This was just an elaborate camping trip with obstacles. The tunnels were no different from the woods behind his childhood home, just with metal walls instead of trees. Marcus heard another of his alarms trigger and smiled. Kethvar was now chasing a maintenance bot that Marcus had programmed to move in random patterns through the lower-level tunnels. The poor render would probably spend the next 10 minutes trying to corner a robot. Through his earpiece, Marcus heard something that made him pause. Heavy breathing, not from exertion, but from what sounded like stress. Kethvar was getting tired. That was interesting. Marcus had been assuming that his advantage was knowledge of human wilderness techniques. But maybe there was more to it than that. He thought about what he knew of Krillian physiology from his xenobiology classes. Krillians were ambush predators originally, built for short bursts of incredible speed and power, but not for extended pursuits. Their natural hunting strategy was to identify prey, get close without being detected, then strike quickly and decisively. This whole situation was the opposite of what Kethvar's instincts were designed for. The render was being forced to engage in a lengthy pursuit against quarry that refused to behave predictably. It was like asking a cheetah to run a marathon while chasing a rabbit that kept disappearing into holes. Marcus made a decision. Instead of continuing to evade until the hour was up, He started moving toward Kethvar's position. Not to confront the render directly, but to get close enough to observe. He found Kethvar 3 levels down, standing in the middle of a tunnel junction, and looking genuinely confused. The great assassin was turning in slow circles, trying to figure out which direction its prey had gone. Its breathing was labored, and Marcus could see stress indicators in its posture. Kethvar appears to be experiencing difficulty. Professor Veltar's voice came through the earpiece. Physiological readings show elevated stress hormones and fatigue. Marcus felt something unexpected. Sympathy. This wasn't fair to Kethvar. The render was operating completely outside its natural element, while Marcus was basically having the time of his life. He made another decision. Moving carefully, Marcus approached Kethvar from behind. When he was about 10 feet away, he cleared his throat softly. Kethvar spun around with incredible speed, claws extended, ready to strike. But Marcus wasn't attacking. Instead, he was holding out his water bottle and a second sandwich he'd been saving. "You look tired," Marcus said simply, "and probably thirsty. Want to take a break?" The render stared at him for a long moment, claws still extended. Through the earpiece, Marcus could hear absolute silence from the observers above. No one seemed to know what to say. "The hour is not yet complete," Kethvar said finally. "I know, but you're exhausted, and this isn't really fair to you. You're built for quick strikes, not endurance hunting. It's like asking me to breathe underwater or see in total darkness. I'm just operating in my natural environment." Marcus sat down cross-legged on the tunnel floor, placing the water and sandwich between himself and the render. "Besides, I'm curious about something. Mind if I ask you a question?" Kethvar slowly lowered its claws but remained standing. "What question?" "You've ended 3 wars by eliminating key targets. That's impressive. But how did you identify the right targets? I mean, wars usually involve lots of people making lots of different decisions. How did you know which deaths would actually stop the fighting?" The question seemed to catch Kethvar off guard. It tilted its head, considering. Research, analysis, understanding of political structures and personality profiles. "Exactly," Marcus said enthusiastically. "See, that's what I found interesting about your lecture. You weren't just talking about killing techniques. You were talking about problem solving, how to identify the core issue and address it efficiently." Marcus pulled out his tablet and showed Kethvar some of his notes from the earlier lecture. "Look at this. When you described eliminating the leaders of the Vegan War, you didn't just kill everyone in charge. You identified the 3 specific individuals whose deaths would remove the primary obstacles to peace negotiation. That's not just hunting. That's systems analysis." Kethvar moved closer, examining the tablet. "You understood this?" "Of course. It's just logic. Remove the specific problem, not everything adjacent to the problem. Like when we were building shelters at Scout Camp. If your roof was leaking, you didn't tear down the whole structure. You identified the exact spot where water was getting in and fixed just that part." "Scout Camp," Kethvar repeated slowly. "Right. Or like tracking wounded game. You don't follow every broken branch or disturbed leaf. You look for the pattern that tells you where the animal is actually heading. Same principle, different application." Marcus stood up and gestured around the tunnels. "This whole exercise we just did? I wasn't thinking about it as combat or hunting. To me, this was just like orienteering or capture the flag. Navigate through unknown territory, avoid detection, use available resources to achieve objectives, basic outdoor recreation." Through the earpiece, Marcus heard Professor Veltar's voice, very quiet. "Basic outdoor recreation. Humans learn these skills as children?" Kethvar asked. "Sure, has to be that way. Earth's dangerous, remember? Kids need to know how to take care of themselves, how to find food and water, how to make shelter, how to avoid or escape from dangerous situations, how to think through problems and adapt when things don't go as planned." Marcus picked up the water bottle and offered it to Kethvar again. "That's why I was smiling when I first saw you. You're not scary to me. You're like a really advanced wilderness instructor, someone who's taken basic survival skills and refined them to an art form." Kethvar accepted the water bottle with one clawed hand and drank deeply. "Your people see me as an instructor?" "Well, I do. Can't speak for all humans, but yeah. I'd love to learn more about your techniques. The way you analyzed different species' vulnerabilities was fascinating. And your approach to environmental assessment was really sophisticated. You want to learn assassination techniques," Kethvar said carefully. I want to learn problem-solving techniques, Marcus corrected. The fact that you apply them to ending conflicts is just one possible use. But the underlying skills, analysis, planning, adaptation, efficiency, those are useful for lots of things. Marcus sat back down and looked up at the render. Like diplomacy, for instance. Understanding different species' psychology, identifying key decision-makers, finding elegant solutions to complex problems. Seems like there's a lot of overlap between what you do and what I'm studying to do. The tunnel was quiet for several moments. Then Kethavar's mandibles clicked softly. No one has ever described my work as problem-solving before. Really?
What do they usually call it?
Murder, terrorism, necessary evil. The render sat down across from Marcus, its massive form folding with surprising grace. Your classmates fear me. Your professors study me as an example of violence in interstellar relations. But you see an instructor. That's because they're looking at the wrong part, Marcus said. They're focused on the ending people part. But that's just the tool you use. The really impressive stuff is everything that comes before. The analysis, the planning, the precision. The way you solve those conflicts by removing specific obstacles rather than just causing general destruction. Through the earpiece, they could hear heated discussion from the classroom above. Words like dangerous, misguided, and alarming perspective were being thrown around. Your people are concerned about your attitude, Kethavar observed. Marcus shrugged. They're scared because they don't understand. They think human survival skills make us naturally violent, but it's the opposite. We learn these skills so we don't have to be violent. Prevention, preparation, and efficient problem-solving means most conflicts never happen in the first place. And when conflicts do happen, then we solve them as quickly and efficiently as possible. Same principle you use, just usually with less permanent results. Marcus grinned. Though I admit your approach is definitely more final. Kethavar made that clicking sound again. Human, would you like to learn more about tactical analysis? Absolutely. But first, can I show you something? I think you might find it interesting. Marcus pulled up another photo on his tablet. This one showed him and a group of other teenagers working together to build a rope bridge across a small river. Everyone was muddy and wet, but they were all smiling. This is from Advanced Scout Camp. We had to get our whole team across this river.